Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. It's the weekend, so today's video is very foreign policy and ideology heavy. As for the latter, we will be discussing Beijing's vision for its new world order. And to finish the video, we will return to the economy, as several very prominent Chinese experts warn that the local fiscal and debt situation is a crisis much worse than the central government anticipates. Today's episode is a big episode, but like I said, it's the weekend, and Saturday viewers are typically the more core viewership of China Update, who really like to dive into those details, and that's what today's episode is all about. I'm quite excited, so without any further ado, let's jump in. We start with foreign affairs, specifically US-China relations. This week, the US House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party held a hearing in New York City titled Systemic Risk, the Chinese Communist Party Threat to US Financial Stability. The audience included Wall Street bankers. Representative Mike Gallagher, the chair of the committee, told US outlet Semaphore that he might widen the panel's investigation into, quote, Wall Street's ties to China's military sector and its human rights abuses, end quote. In the 48 hours before this event, Gallagher and others on the House committee had conducted privately held meetings in New York with Wall Street executives, pharmaceutical company executives, and others, meetings which, we remember, included war game exercises on the financial impacts of mainland invasion of Taiwan, as well as discussions on, quote, the risks of investing in China, end quote. Outlet Semaphore also reports that lawmakers are considering requiring US companies to disclose just how much and what kind of business they're doing in China. Meanwhile, US outlet Bloomberg reports this week that, incredibly, Wall Street executives want anonymity to talk China with Congress, fearing retaliation from Beijing if they make their comments public. Speaking to the outlet, China Committee head Gallagher reportedly expressed on this point, quote, we have people tell us explicitly that their Chinese LPs, they're referring to Chinese investors with funds managed by US firms, would object if they knew they were meeting with us, end quote. Adding, quote, when they meet with members of Congress, it's like we're in some witness protection program and we have to shuttle them around. The dilemma we face is how difficult it is to mobilize action in light of these concerns. End quote. Speaking to US outlet Politico, Gallagher expressed this week that his House committee's message and actions is facing a lot of resistance on Wall Street too, telling the outlet, quote, it's fair to say the bankers and the asset managers find my view of the world to be too hawkish. A lot of people here still cling to the theory that financial interdependence is a stabilizing mechanism and that ultimately China will be a more responsible stakeholder the more enmeshed they are in the US capital markets and the more enmeshed we are in Chinese manufacturing. End quote. We note that renowned historian and Hoover Institute fellow Neil Ferguson recently observed that this argument was also made about the UK and Germany in the lead-up to World War I. Let's look at one more statement from Gallagher. The reason we're examining his statement so much is because, as head of the US House Committee on China, he has significant influence on US policymaking and discourse in the US in relation to China. Speaking to US-based National Review, Gallagher reportedly told the outlet that the US needs to be on the lookout for spying, expressing, quote, the Ministry of State Security doesn't occupy the same place in people's imaginations or minds than, say, the KGB did. It's hard for people to truly understand the scale and scope of Chinese espionage. As a result, and because Hollywood is bought and paid for by China in many cases, like there's no movies to put this into terms that people can understand. End quote. Indeed, America's close ally across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom, has been rocked with a spying scandal this week, which we covered a few days ago. Since we published that video a few days ago, British Prime Minister Sunak has conceded that, quote, further investment and more government action is needed to help the UK combat the challenge China poses to Britain's security, prosperity and values, end quote, adding that it was a, quote, absolute priority for the government to protect the UK from interference from Beijing and elsewhere, end quote. The Prime Minister also made reference to what UK-based Financial Times described as, quote, a damning report published in July by Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee, end quote, which found Britain's approach to China's, quote, increasingly sophisticated spying operations in the UK was completely inadequate, end quote. In a separate government statement made on Thursday, Downing Street expressed, quote, Chinese spies are targeting British officials in sensitive positions in politics, defence and business as part of an increasingly sophisticated spying operation to gain access to secrets, end quote. Beijing, through official statements and state media, rejects these spying claims, with the state-run Global Times writing this week that they are based on anti-China bias and neo-McCarthyism. Next up, we look at ideology, China's New World Order, and the Chinese economy. If you're enjoying today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. It's a huge help for the channel if you can like, share and subscribe, especially giving these videos to people who you think would enjoy this sort of content. For anyone who wants to go the extra mile, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This financial support allows the channel to be primarily subscriber supported and not have to rely on corporate sponsorship, and allows the channel to just maintain its sustainability. 6 days a week, these episodes are produced for free for all. I hope to continue doing that, and this support is a huge help in that objective. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, we now move to ideology. This week, the People's Republic of China Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued the so-called Proposal of the People's Republic of China on the Reform and Development of Global Governance. This is a significant move which we must examine here. This is to date the most thorough, authoritative document articulating Beijing's view on what kind of world order it wishes to build, or at least advocate for. It also tells us what rhetoric Beijing will employ to promote this alternative worldview to an international audience. Though much of the developed world will likely be very skeptical of most of this, parts of the developing world, especially those increasingly reliant on Chinese market access and Chinese capital, may be more open to it. The document opens with, quote, today, changes in the world, in our times and in history are unfolding in ways like never before. Facing global changes unseen in a century, and keeping in mind both China's realities and global developments, President Xi Jinping has creatively put forth the vision of building a community with a shared future for mankind. This proposal has pointed the way forward for the future development of the world and provided a solution for common challenges, end quote. The document has 5 key sectors, which we will quote excerpts from shortly. Regular viewers will hear very familiar themes: Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative, Xi Jinping Thought on Diplomacy, the Belt and Road Initiative, etc., developed from across different sources that we've examined in the past. This language will be developed and unified in this document. We now begin quoting selected salient excerpts from the piece. Section 1. Enhancing global security governance and safeguarding world peace and stability. Quote, the Global Security Initiative advocates a commitment to respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries, a commitment to taking the legitimate security concerns of all countries seriously. China firmly supports a political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries should be upheld. The root cause of the crisis lies in the problem of security governance in Europe. Parties concerned must face the crux of the issue squarely. It is important to maintain mutual respect, abandon the Cold War mentality, stop ganging up to stoke camp-based confrontations, and work to build a balanced, effective, and sustainable European security architecture. End quote. 2. Improving global development governance and jointly pursuing global sustainable development, which focuses on the Global Development Initiative. 3. Advocating global human rights and social governance and jointly promoting civilizational exchange and progress, which focuses on Xi Jinping's Global Civilization Initiative. And the point made in the document is especially telling. Quote, "There is no one-size-fits-all model for promoting and protecting human rights. All countries' independent choice of their own path of human rights development should be respected. Human rights have historical, specific, and practical contexts. Human rights issues should not be politicized or used as a tool. Double standard should be rejected, and still less should human rights be used as an excuse to interfere in other countries' internal affairs or encircle and contain other countries as they pursue development." End quote. 4. Developing global governance of new frontiers and building a governance framework for the future. This part pushes back against US use of technology restrictions. Quote, "Scientific and technological advances should benefit all humanity, not becoming means of restricting and containing other countries' development. Certain countries must not erode the governance of new frontiers with their hegemonic mentality, overstretch the concept of national security, and build small yards with high fences," here referring to the term used by Beijing specifically to attack US restrictions on technology, for example, restrictions on semiconductor technology, AI, and others, with their advantage in science and technology. The development of AI benefits all countries, and all countries should be able to participate extensively in the global governance of AI. No party should overstretch the concept of national security or unscrupulously deprive another country of its legitimate right to development. End quote. And 5. Strengthening the core role of the UN and advancing the reform of the global governance system. And this is perhaps the most important part of the document for us to note here. We can see clearly the audience and strategy Beijing will seek to pursue on the international stage. The document explains, quote, "China supports necessary and equitable reform of the Security Council. The Security Council should not become a club of the big countries or rich countries. Its reform should credibly increase the representation and voice of developing countries, redress the historical injustices done to Africa, and give more developing countries with independent foreign policies and just positions the opportunity to sit on the Security Council and participate in its decision-making. China supports making special arrangements to meet Africa's aspiration as a priority." End quote. Interestingly, the document does not really mention the largest developing country in the world, that of India. This is likely because New Delhi is an increasingly acute geopolitical rival from Beijing's perspective. The document concludes by expressing, quote, "China will work together with the rest of the international community to uphold true multinationalism and implement the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative. Together, we will create a better future for all humanity." End quote. The current international order, from which many, including China, have to varying degrees benefited from, was, in collaboration, built and maintained first by the British Empire, and then by a member of her rich progeny, the United States. So it's fitting that we end this part of the video with a comment made by US Secretary of State Blinken in a speech in Washington from this week. Quote, "Beijing and Moscow are working together to make the world safe for autocracy. The People's Republic of China poses the most significant long-term challenge because it not only aspires to reshape the international order, it increasingly has the economic, the diplomatic, the military, the technological power to do just that." End quote. And finally for today's video. Last week, China's prestigious Peking University held a special seminar on a topic we've been following on China Update for some time now: the growing crisis of local government and local government financing vehicle debt and fiscal health. To end today's video, I just wanted to take two of the comments made by two highly respected and influential Chinese voices from this seminar. We will not unpack the background too much of this topic. Regular viewers know this very well. We briefly recall that over the past 20 years, China has largely relied on rapid economic growth to support its debt levels, but deteriorating growth, speed, and quality have revealed deep debt issues at many localities across the country. US ratings agency Standard & Poor's recently estimated that local government financing vehicles Sorry, let me try that one again. US ratings agency Standard & Poor's recently established that local government financing vehicles alone own about 60 trillion yuan, $8.2 trillion in debt, and others put this much higher. US-based Rhodium Group estimates that local government financing vehicle loans make up 20 to 25% of total bank loans in China, and an incredible 51% of all corporate bonds are local government financing vehicle bonds. We end with the speakers, and we remember, of course, that they are being very cautious with their speech, so the speech they are employing here is in of itself quite telling. Quote, "We still need to consider regional defaults. From defaults on the local government financing vehicles to regional commercial banks and rural banks. What do we do when suddenly a series of defaults are taking place in a particular province? What kind of response are we going to see?" End quote. And, quote, "I don't think the central government had properly considered the consequence of restricting local governments' borrowings. I would suggest allowing local governments to sell 2 trillion yuan to 3 trillion yuan of sovereign debt to survive. This is a crisis. It is an urgent thing to do." End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you all back here on Monday.